I heard there's gonna be a celebration.
Celebrations, I love celebrations. What kind of food is there gonna be?
I hope ice cream and cake.
Cake. I love triple chocolate cake.
Oh yeah, who's the celebration for?
It's not who it's for, it's what. It's Juneteenth.
I don't know anyone named June.
Especially with the last name Teenth.
Well, I'm glad you love celebrations. Juneteenth is one of the oldest African American celebrations here in the U.S. And today you're going to learn about June 19, 1865, where you'll learn about the customs and many other areas that you don't even know about. And our narrator, Mr. Shedrick Magali, is going to tell us everything about our history as we journey through this day. What is his name?
Mr. Magali.
Are you ready?
Yes.
Let's listen.
Hello, my name is Shedrick Magali Jr. Thank you for joining us for our 2021 Juneteenth celebration. Juneteenth is the oldest nationally celebrated commemoration of the ending of slavery in the United States. Dating back to 1865, it was on June 19th that the Union soldiers, led by Major General Gordon Granger, landed at Galveston, Texas, with news that the war had ended and that the enslaved were now free. Note that this was 2.5 years after President Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation, which had become official January 1st, 1863. The Emancipation Proclamation had little impact on the Texans due to the minimal number of Union troops to enforce the new executive order. However, with the surrender of General Lee in April of 1865 and the arrival of General Granger's regiment, the forces were finally strong enough to influence and overcome the resistance. Later attempts to explain this 2.5-year delay in the receipt of this important news have yielded several versions that have been handed down through the years. Often told is the story of a messenger who was murdered on his way to Texas with the news of freedom. Another is that the news was deliberately withheld by the enslavers to maintain the labor force on the plantations. And still another is that federal troops actually waited for the slave owners to reap the benefits of one last cotton harvest before going to Texas to enforce the Emancipation Proclamation. All of which, or none of these versions, could be true, but certainly for some, President Lincoln's authority over the rebellious states was in question. Whatever the reasons, conditions in Texas remained status quo, well beyond what was statutory. One of General Granger's first orders of business was to read the people of Texas General Order Number 3, which began most significantly with, "The people of Texas are informed that in accordance with a proclamation from the executive of the United States, all slaves are free. This involves an absolute equality of rights and rights of property between former masters and slaves, and the connection heretofore existing between them becomes that between employer and hired laborer. The reactions to this profound news range from pure shock to immediate jubilation. While many lingered to learn of this new employer to employee relationship, many left before these offers were completely off the lips of their former masters, attesting to the varying conditions on the plantations and the realization of freedom. Even with nowhere to go, many felt that leaving the plantation would be their first grasp of freedom. North was a logical destination, and for many, it represented true freedom. While the desire to reach family members in neighboring states drove some into Louisiana, Arkansas, and Oklahoma. Settling into these new areas as free men and women brought on new realities and the challenges of establishing heretofore non-existent status for Black people in America. Recounting the memories of that great day in June of 1865 and its festivities would serve as motivation as well as a release from the growing pressures encountered in their new territories. The celebration of June 19th was coined Juneteenth and grew with more participation from descendants. The Juneteenth celebration was a time for reassuring each other, for praying, and for gathering remaining family members. Juneteenth continued to be highly revered in Texas decades later, with many former slaves and descendants making an annual pilgrimage back to Galveston on this date.
Point 1. Enslaved people had already been emancipated. They just didn't know it.
Right. After Abraham Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation, January 1st, 1863, the people didn't even know it because they waited in churches and private homes to hear the news about their freedom. But there was no one there to enforce it.
Point 2. There are many theories as to why the Emancipation Proclamation wasn't enforced in Texas.
One theory is that the original messenger was murdered because they didn't want that announcement to get out. And then there was the real reason, probably, is Lincoln Proclamation just wasn't enforced.
Number 3. The announcement actually urged freed men and freed women to stay with their former owners. Wow, they told them to stay with their owners? Mr. Magali read part of Order Number 3 from the War of the Rebellion we know as the Civil War. He stopped at, the freedmen are advised to remain quietly at their present homes and work for wages. But he didn't read, they were informed that they will not be allowed to collect at military posts, meaning they won't be able to go there, and that the freedmen will not be supported in idleness. Idleness?
Do you know what idleness means?
No.
Idleness means you better be working somewhere or have a job.
In fact, 6 days earlier, General Sheridan, a Union general during the Civil War, had written to General Granger that all slaves are free, but must remain at their homes.
The proclamation of the Executive United States, all slaves are free. And this involves the absolute equality of the personal rights and rights of property between former masters and slaves, and the connection heretofore existing between them becomes that between employers and hired labor. The freemen are advised to remain quietly at their present homes and work for wages.
Number 4. What followed was known as the scatter.
The scatter. Most of the freed people did not want to be on the plantations that was enslaving them. So they went from plantation to plantation looking for their loved ones, their families who had been sold. Wow, that was a lot to take in.
Yeah.
I've actually seen the Emancipation Proclamation. We got one right here. But I've never looked at the major details. I mean, it really didn't free the slaves.
What?
But Lincoln freed all the slaves.
Not exactly. but we're going to learn it shortly. I'm actually honored that I had a great-great-grandmother to live to be 121 who shared with me about all these different stories. She would show me rocks. These are not just rocks. She would use these rocks to dig into the earth to plant. Or she would use these rocks to beat clothes to wash. Well, actually, she even made soap. With the sheets, she'll put the soap in the sheets and pound it on the ground and then put it into this big black kettle with fire under it and wash. I literally had to wash too. My grandmother was strong. They followed plows and they moved through the fields sowing seeds. They touched the earth and the grains grew. They were full of sturdiness and singing. My grandmothers were strong. My grandmothers was full of memories, smelling of the soap and of onions and wet clay with veins rolling through over quick hands. They had many clean words to say. My grandmothers were strong. Why am I not they?
When I am weak, Lord, you are mighty. When I am weak, Lord, I am strong. When I am weak, Lord, you are mighty. Oh, oh, oh. When I am weak, Lord,
a range of activities were provided to entertain the masses, many of which continue in tradition today. Rodeos, fishing, barbecuing, and baseball are just a few of the typical Juneteenth activities you may witness today. Juneteenth almost always focus on education and self-improvement. Thus, often guest speakers are brought in and the elders are called upon to recount the events of the past. Prayer services were also a major part of these celebrations. Certain foods became popular and subsequently synonymous with Juneteenth celebrations, such as strawberry soda pop. More traditional and just as popular was the barbecuing, through which Juneteenth participants could share in the spirit and the aromas that their ancestors, the newly emancipated African Americans, would have experienced during their ceremonies. Hence, the barbecue pit is often established as the center of attention at Juneteenth celebrations. Food was abundant because everyone prepared a special dish. Meats such as lamb, pork, and beef, which were not available every day, were brought on this special occasion. A true Juneteenth celebrations left visitors well satisfied and with enough conversation to last until the next. Dress was also an important element in early Juneteenth customs and is often still taken seriously, particularly by the direct descendants who can make the connection to this tradition's roots. During slavery, there were laws on the books in many areas that prohibited or limited the dressing of the enslaved. During the initial days of the emancipation celebrations, there are accounts of former slaves tossing their ragged garments into the creeks and into the rivers and adorning themselves with clothing taken from the plantations belonging to their former masters. Juneteenth and society in the early years, little interest existed outside the African American community in participation in the celebrations. In some cases, there was outwardly exhibited resistance by barring the use of public property of and for the festivities. Most of the festivities found themselves out in rural areas around rivers and creeks that could provide for additional activities such as fishing, horseback riding, and barbecues. Often, church grounds were the site for such activities. Eventually, as African Americans became landowners, land was donated and dedicated for these activities. One of the earliest documented land purchases in the name of Juneteenth was organized by Reverend Jack Yates. This fundraising effort yielded $1,000 and made possible the purchase of Emacipation Park in Houston, Texas. In Mexia, the local Juneteenth organization purchased Booker T. Washington Park, which had become the Juneteenth celebration site in 1898. There are accounts of Juneteenth activities being interrupted and halted by white landowners demanding that their laborers return to work. However, it seems most allowed their workers the day off, and some even made donations of food and money. For decades, these annual celebrations flourished, growing continuously with each passing year. In Booker T. Washington Park, as many as 20,000 African Americans once attended during the course of a week, making the celebration one of the state's largest Juneteenth celebrations. In Booker T. Washington Park, as many as 20,000 African Americans once attended during the course of a week, making the celebration one of the state's largest. Economic and cultural forces led to a decline in Juneteenth activities and participants beginning in the early 1900s. Classroom and textbook education in lieu of traditional home and family taught practices stifled the interest of the youth due to less emphasis and detail on the lives of former slaves. Classroom textbooks proclaim Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation of January 1st, 1863 as the date signaling the ending of slavery, and mentioned little or nothing of the impact of General Granger's arrival on June 19th. The Depression forced many people off the farms and into the cities to find work. In these urban environments, employers were less eager to grant leaves to celebrate this date. Thus, unless June 19th fell on a weekend or holiday, there were very few participants available. July 4th was already the established independence holiday, and a rise in patriotism steered more toward this celebration.
I was watching this movie, Miss Juneteenth, and then I found out that there is a Miss Juneteenth pageant happening right now in Tampa Bay, Florida. It is open to middle school and high school girls. They each compete in with a talent, community achievements, which is basically things that they have done for their community, and they have to have poise and grace for their evening wear. I'm practicing what it would be like if I were running for Junior Miss Juneteenth. If I were running, my talent would be singing. Ladies and gentlemen, I will be singing the Black National Anthem. Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring, ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise.
Enough, enough, enough. Just stop.
How dare you interrupt me in the middle of my BEA beautiful performance?
Just stop.
Rude. Point number 5. Not all enslaved people were freed instantly.
The Emancipation Proclamation gave details that the slaves that are from rebellious states are not free.
Point number 6. Freedom created other problems.
That's what happened. People started going to sharecropping, and it was a major problem because they would be in debt for a very long time. So people felt that was another part of slavery.
Number 7, there were limited opportunities for celebrating.
There was limited things for celebrating because it was only where people pulled together $800 to purchase 10 acres of land, and then they named it the Emancipation Park. And that was the only place in Houston where African Americans can get together in a public place until 1950.
Number 8, Juneteenth celebrations decreased during the time of Jim Crow.
During the era of Jim Crow, the laws until the Civil Rights Movement of 1960, when the Poor People March planned by Martin Luther King was purposely scheduled to coincide with the dates. The march brought Juneteenth back to the forefront, and when march participants took celebrations back to their home states, the holiday was reborn.
The civil rights movement of the 50s and 60s yielded both positive and negative results for the Juneteenth celebrations. While it pulled many of the African American youth away and into the struggle for racial equality, many linked these struggles to the historical struggles of their ancestors. This was evidenced by student demonstrators involved in the Atlanta Civil Rights Campaign in the early 1960s who wore Juneteenth freedom buttons. Again, in 1968, Juneteenth received another strong resurgence through the Poor People's March to Washington, D.C. Reverend Ralph Abernathy's call for people of all races, creeds, economic levels, and professions to come to Washington to show support for the poor. Many of these attendees returned home and initiated Juneteenth celebrations in areas previously absent of such activities. In fact, two of the largest Juneteenth celebrations founded after this march are now held in Milwaukee and Minneapolis. On January 1st, 1980, Juneteenth became an official state holiday through the efforts of Al Edwards, an African-American state legislator. The successful passage of this bill marked Juneteenth as the first emancipation celebration granted official state recognition. Edwards has since actively sought to spread the observance of Juneteenth all across America. Today, Juneteenth is enjoying a phenomenal growth rate within communities and organizations throughout the country. Institutions such as the Smithsonian, the Henry Ford Museum, and others have begun sponsoring Juneteenth-centered activities. In recent years, a number of local and national Juneteenth organizations have arisen to take their place alongside older organizations, all with the mission to promote and cultivate knowledge and appreciation of African American history and culture. Juneteenth today celebrates African American freedom and achievement while encouraging continuous self-development and respect for all cultures. As it takes on a more national, symbolic, and even global perspective, the events of 1865 in Texas are not forgotten, for all of the roots tie back to this fertile soil from which a national day of pride is growing. The future of Juneteenth looks as bright as the number of cities and states creating Juneteenth committees continues to increase. Respect and appreciation for all of our differences grow out of exposure and working together. Getting involved in supporting Juneteenth celebrations creates new bonds of friendships and understanding among us. This indeed brightens our future, and that is the spirit of Juneteenth.
Point 9. Texas was the first state to declare Juneteenth a state holiday.
Texas deemed the holiday of statewide recognition in 1980. Texas was the first to do so.
Point 10. Juneteenth is still not a federal holiday.
As Senator Barack Obama co-sponsored legislation for Juneteenth to be a federal holiday.
Number 11, the Juneteenth flag is full of symbolism.
The colors red, white, and blue that pays homage to our enslaved people and their descendants. The white star in the middle of the horizon that pays homage to Texas, and the blue and the red that represent the new freedom and the new people.
Number 12, Juneteenth traditions are different across the United States.
Yes, we're having concerts, parades, celebration, red soda water, strawberry soda, Marcus Garvey salad with red, green, and black beans.
For my people, everywhere singing their slave songs repeatedly, their dirges and their ditties, oh, their blues and their jubilees, praying their prayers nightly to an unknown God, and bending their knees humbly to an unseen power. For my playmates in the clay and in the dust and the sand of Alabama backyards, playing, baptizing, and preaching, and doctor, and jail, and soldier, and mama, and cooking, and playhouse, and store, and hair, and Miss Comby, and company. For the boys and girls who grew up in spite of these things, to be man and to be woman, to laugh and dance and sing and play, and drink their wine of religion and success, to marry their playmates and bear children, darling children, and then die of consumption, anemia, and lynching. For my people, throwing 47th Street in Chicago, Lenox Avenue in New York, and Rampart Street in New Orleans. Lost, disinherited, dispossessed, but happy people, filling those cabarets and those taverns and other people's pockets. Yeah. Needing the bread, the shoes, the milk, the land, the money, and the something. Yeah. Just that something all our own. For my people, you just standing and staring and trying to fashion a better place from the confusion, from the hypocrisy, and from the misunderstanding. Trying to fashion a world that will hold all the people, all the faces, all the Adams and Eves and their countless generations. Let a new earth arise. Let another world be born. Let a bloody peace be written in the sky. Let a second generation full of courage issue forth. And let a people, oh, a people loving freedom, come to growth. And let a beauty so full of healing and so full of strength be the pulsing of our spirits and our blood. Let a martial song be written. Just let the dirges disappear. And let a race of men of men now rise and take control.
Wade in the water, wade in the water, children. Wade in the water, God's gonna trouble the water. Wade in the water. Jordan River is chilly and cold. It chills my body, but not my soul. I've never been to heaven, but I've been told the streets out there are paved with gold. If you get there before I do, tell all my friends I'm coming too. Wade in the water. Wade in the water. Wade in the water. God's gonna trouble the water. Wade in the water. Wade in the water. Wade in the water. Wade in the water. God's gonna trouble the water.